Welcome to Recovery Comes Home Radio, your go-to podcast for all things related to addiction recovery. Whether you are an individual in recovery, a concerned loved one, or a dedicated professional, this podcast is tailored just for you. Here we are all about empowering you with the tools, insights, and inspiration you need to move forward. So grab your headphones, tune in, and let's embark on this transformative journey together. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Recovery Comes Home Radio. We're trying to change the face of recovery because we know the face of addiction has already changed. And so I'm really excited for you guys to meet our next guest, Brian McAlister. He's a best-selling author. He's the founder of Full Recovery Educational Enterprises. He's an innovator and a public speaker who puts his Fortune 100 business background to help turn his life around. And now he's here to share his wisdom with us. He actually, just before we started the recording, he told me in the green room a statistic that I hadn't heard. And I think it's important for our audience to hear this. 70% of all clinically diagnosed substance use disorder individuals are employed. It's not the bum in the street. It looks just like you and me now. So, Brian, can you tell us a little bit about your story, and we'll get right into it?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for allowing me to come here and talk with your audience. It's wonderful because I was told in the beginning, you can't keep it unless you give it away. So that's what I'm here for. I'd like your audience, if they would just keep this question in the back of their mind as they hear my story. It might help them relate. What would you try to do in your life? What would you want to accomplish if success was guaranteed? If you couldn't fail, where do your interests lie? What would you like to do? What would you like to leave behind in this world? And with that, I'll start. My name is Brian, and I am definitely an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I'm in recovery. My sober date is August 2nd, 1990. So real briefly, I'll start at the beginning. I started drinking and drugging at around 12 years old. I'm from a good long line of Irish Catholic alcoholics. We worked hard. We played hard. We were blue collar. I was raised about 10 minutes outside of New York City in New Jersey. And it was industrial America. And I picked up a lot of habits as a young man that now that I look back, they didn't serve me well. And I came by them honestly. People gave me a lot of these ideas. People told me what I was able to accomplish. People put some of their fears and desires and limitations into my psyche growing up, and I embraced them. One of those was that it's okay to drink alcohol 24/7 as long as you can make it to work. That was the yardstick by which success was measured. Right. As long as you could get to work, you didn't have a drinking problem. And
I work.
Yeah, I work.
Don't say anything. You can't say anything about my drinking because I put food on the table.
Exactly. I'm a good guy. I'm a stand-up guy. I go to work, and drinking's only a good man's fault. That type of attitude. So I started drinking it. And as a young person, being raised in an alcoholic house, things were never stable. The same things that I could get yelled and screamed at for yesterday were totally acceptable today, because the people that loved me really were struggling with their own mental health, using alcohol and drugs to medicate themselves to make their life tolerable, for lack of a better term. But once I had drugs and alcohol, I never felt comfortable in my own skin. I've listened to thousands of people tell their story, and it's almost a universal trait. We don't feel comfortable in our own skin. I felt like everybody else knew how to do life, but I never got the instructions. So I put on a lot of faces. I wore a lot of masks to cover my fear, my insecurities. But once I found alcohol, I was off to the races. I had that sense of ease and comfort they talk about from taking the first few drinks. All of a sudden, everything settled down and I could see life more clearly. It was back for me. It was back in the early 1970s. So it was a different time. Yeah. And I went from drinking to drugging in literally weeks. And we're very bright people, alcoholics and addicts.
Geniuses. No, geniuses. Everyone in our houses are geniuses.
It's a fact. They've done all kinds of studies, and it's proven that alcoholic and addict substance users have far above average intelligence and earning capacity when they get sober. So because on that point, the alcohol, the substance use is hijacking the prefrontal cortex, which is where your executive function lies. And so they've just got that reptilian brain going, react, avoid, flight, fight, flee, freeze, Exactly. And in the pre-interview, we talked a little bit about DNA. Like DNA is a part, but it's even deeper than DNA. I
Yeah.
know I was an alcoholic and addict from the first drink and drug I tried. I chased that feeling. I loved it. It's funny. I see people all the time, and typically everybody's going to have a drink. Maybe three guys get together or three gals, and they go out and somebody gets some liquor and they all try it. Everybody gets sick the first time. Two of them say, I'm never going to do that again. The third one says, boy, I can't wait to do that again. We know who the winner is, who has this character trait, who got the DNA quality. So that's
that's the thing, is it's so socially acceptable in our society, the things that are legal, including, addiction can stretch all the way to screen addiction, where we've got people that their families are leaving them because they can't stop playing Call of Duty. And they've made another family down in the basement with their friends that are playing shoot 'em up games. Yep. With their own family upstairs, living without them.
Addiction to me is any unhealthy distraction that really interrupts my flow of life, and it keeps me from reaching my full potential. And it could be anything from drugs and alcohol to sex to work to screen to whatever else I'm using to escape. And there's nothing wrong with anything I just talked about if people are more capable of handling that than I am. So as a recovering addict and alcoholic, I have to make choices, and I jealously guard my recovery. That's the first choice I always do. Typical story. Very quickly, I wound up, school grades started dropping, friends. We started getting our own little group of people, a motley crew of everything from athletes and smart kids to deviants and street kids. But we shared one thing in common. We all got high.
Yeah.
So that it's funny what strange bedfellows that makes. So
isn't that the truth?
Yeah, it really is.
People that wouldn't cross.
Exactly. People that normally don't mix. We all of a sudden, here we are, and we share that common bond. And what happened is I was going actually to parochial school in the city like that. There was a church in your neighborhood and everybody belonged, and that was it. And it might happen to be a Catholic church. And I was eventually expelled from that school. For the conduct was just atrocious. I was dealing drugs. I was missing school. All the things. I got the old, I don't care attitude, for lack of a better term. They call it the efforts. I had a big case of it. And when they threw me out, it was almost like I almost relished it, because now it's my world. I'll go do what I want. Nobody's going to tell me.
Now I can do what I want. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Yeah.
Exactly. Defiance is the one characteristic.
Forget about responsibility. We're just going to go do it and do what feels good.
Exactly. In the minute. I wasn't worried about my future, my 401k, my job, or my family. I was just worried about, let's go party. It's funny looking back on it, ruining my health, my family, my relationships, my career, risking my life and my freedom. I called it partying. There's no part.
There's no part of that that's fun.
I reinforced a negative thinking pattern behind a positive way of communicating with myself that didn't serve me well and ultimately led me to destruction. So when I got out, I wound up, again, it was a different time. I wound up dropping a hit of LSD, and I wound up in Phoenix, Arizona from New Jersey. I dropped it, and all of a sudden I came down. I'm in Phoenix. I had no idea how I got there, jumped the plane, and I walk out, and it was my first geographic change. I was going to go someplace else because I had poured out my welcome. I had been thrown out of school. The law in the area was on to me. My doors were closing. So I was going to go someplace else, and I wouldn't drink and drug so much, which, of course, we all know doesn't really work. Because I brought all those habits with me. So when I woke up there or came down there, I decided I'd stay. And within 3 weeks, of course, I ran into the exact same people I left in New Jersey. I wound up moving in with a couple guys back from Vietnam, and they were older than me. I was a kid. I was 17, 18 years old then. And these guys were like 28, 29.
Right.
And they were my heroes. I looked up to them. They were men. They had experience. They were smuggling in drugs from Mexico. So we were unloading planes at night. They owned all kinds of porno stores. So they gave me a job as a night manager of a dirty bookstore. All these things, but I'm making money and I'm around a different group of people. Their motto was, I'll never forget it, we'd never steal anything from you. We'd rather have you give it to us. They were two con men. They had 9 names on their mailbox. None of them was theirs.
Wow.
It was like they were way ahead of the curve. But through the eyes of a boy, which is what I was, this looked cool. It looked exciting, looked adventurous. So I continued down that road. I wound up coming back to New Jersey, and I ran into a girl I had dated in high school who was nothing like me. She was a Catholic girl. She was pretty. She was honest. She didn't drink and drug. She would have a beer, you know what I mean? That kind of deal. And I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And we have alcoholics and addicts often have an uncanny ability to find good people, spouses or loved ones who are going to try to help save us from ourselves. And we take a hostage, as they say. So I told her I was going to take her on the adventure of a lifetime. And I did. So we bought a Harley. We wound up traveling the country. We lived in a tent. We lived in a camper. We bounced around. We did everything you did back there that hippies would do. And finally, we wound up in Arizona again. We were in California for quite a while, and my wife got pregnant. Now, at the time, it's hard to believe I used to have hair.
Yeah, my husband's got your same haircut.
Yeah, it's what happens. And if
It's a
I had
good
hair
one.
down to
It's
my
good in
butt at the
style.
time. And so she's, Brian, you got to grow up. You got to change. Well, I have a child coming. By now, I'm full-blown drug addict and alcoholic. I see nothing. I see no change. I have no idea. It's the 80s by now. I am living in a cocaine psychosis. I'm dealing cocaine. This is it. And I'm drinking and driving my Harley every day. So the point finally came when she had enough. We were living. By now, I'm parking my Harley in the living room because I'm afraid, I'm paranoid. People are going to steal it. She was living on constant eggshells of what I would do next. So It came down that I had to make his choice. And my choice was, rather than get sober, I was going to leave my wife and son out west and head back east. And I gave them my goodbyes. So the day before I was leaving, I went out with a bunch of good time friends that, of course, I don't know anymore. But I totaled my motorcycle. I drove it off a cliff, high on alcohol and drugs. And I was by myself in the desert, about 40 miles from anything that looked like civilization. And miracles happened in my life. And I used to think I got away with things because I was so clever. Now I know that God was looking out for me, plain and simple. At the time, I thought I was an atheist. But, that shows you what you know.
Yeah.
So they
start out with the coincidences and the miracles will follow.
Exactly. You're exactly right. So what happened was, first miracle, I was out in the middle of nowhere. A tourist from Minnesota, who I'll never know, pulled off the road to relieve themselves on a frontage road. And they looked over this cliff and found this wrecked Harley and a guy laying in a hump of blood, and drove 16 miles or something to the first payphone and called the state troopers. That was the first miracle. Somebody found me in the middle of nowhere. The chances of that happening are nothing.
Yeah.
And they sent the helicopter out for me, and they flew me in, and I started coming out of it in the hospital, in the emergency room. I had a broken back. I had a traumatic head injury, which I took 380 stitches in my head. I broke my hands, my feet, all my ribs. You name it, I broke it. And then I have multiple compound fractures of the fibula and tibia. And they told me they were going to amputate my leg. So it's funny. I screamed and yelled and, made demands. But when they closed that little curtain around you in the emergency room, it's amazing how all that atheist stuff went right out the window. God, they're going to cut my leg off. Please help me, God. I hadn't talked about God except to debate whether he existed or not in a bar for many years. So,
but going face to face with losing your limbs.
Yeah.
You get humble.
Yeah, that power greater than yourself. That's when I really needed one. I didn't know anything about that at the time. Next miracle happens. The wife I left, I was leaving, shows up at the hospital. They called her. She's fighting with the doctors, trying to get me stable. Make a long story short, all these things start happening. A young doctor who doesn't work in that hospital shows up in the emergency room. He's visiting somebody else. He's out of medical school 3 weeks. He sees my act and he sees what's going on. And he grabs my wife and says, we can get him stabilized. We can keep the infection down. Send him where I'm going. He's only 3 weeks out. He's never operated on anybody. He says, I'll try to save his leg. So that's what happened. They sent me to his place.
Wow.
They drilled holes and screws and plates and all types of stuff, which was experimental at that time. And they wound up saving my leg. So I'm in the hospital for months, and I got the broken back and I got the shaved head. Then my hair went. It was full of stitches, my head. And you would think that'd be enough to be a bottom to talk some sense into me, but hardly a case. It's only a flesh wound.
Only a flesh wound.
Yeah. And
love Monty Python.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And at the time, I wound up back in my little apartment now, and I get out of the hospital. My wife picks me up, and I'm up on the second floor. And the first thing I did was throw my crutches over the balcony railing, hop down on my butt in the back brace with the leg braces, with the whole deal, stitched from head to toe. And I hopped 1.5 miles to the closest bar in 105-degree heat in Phoenix. That's the type of draw alcohol and drugs had on me. but we are clever. I realized doing this, how difficult it was and how thirsty I would be on the way home. So I made a beer holder for each crutch, and I tried to have it patented so I could drink on that long hop back. I'm thinking everybody will want one of these who winds up, but this is the way we think. We're not dopey people. So this is how it goes. My life gets progressively worse. And for 6 more years, you would think that'd be a bottom, but it was nothing. I went lower and lower. Eventually we wound up, I dragged my poor family. By now, my son was 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. And I dragged him back to New Jersey, and I was looking at the end. I started drinking and drugging when I was just before my 13th birthday. And now I was in my early 30s and I had nothing. I was unemployable. I couldn't think. I wasn't coming home for weeks at a time. All the cleverness, all the scamming that I used to do to get by, I didn't have it anymore. And I realized I was at the mercy of the street. I really did.
No party, right? No party.
Yeah, exactly. And yet I would call it partying. That's the insanity of it.
Yeah.
I kept convincing myself that this is normal. Everybody I knew was doing what I did. So of course, you know what I mean? It was perfectly normal. One day I woke up behind an auto body shop in a town called Nutley, New Jersey. Hadn't been home for quite a while. And I was pretty nutly, so there was a little omen in that too. And I walked out into a field behind this body shop. It was about 7 in the morning. It was in August. And I had that moment of clarity that people talk about. I stood there and I saw my whole life flash in front of me. And it wasn't a day any different than a lot of other days. I realized that I was killing myself. And that moment in the hospital, when I asked God for help when they're going to save my leg, flashed into my consciousness. And I asked God again, please help me, kill me or cure me. I can't live like this anymore. I can't go on.
Can't live with it, can't live without it.
Yeah, exactly. The jumping off point.
Yeah.
And what happened was, had I not had that horrible experience in the desert, I wouldn't have had that horrible moment to draw on when I needed that moment of clarity, when I needed to ask God once again. Holy moly, I asked God for help and I got it. Here I am again. I'm in that position again. My toes are over the edge of the cliff. I'm ready to go off again. So I wound up in treatment that day, which was a miracle in of itself. I was the worst guy in treatment. I was the guy nobody wanted to be around. I was the angry guy. I hated everything, everybody. But alcoholics and addicts are really stick-to-it people. We stick to it, whether it's the drinking and drugging, whether it's an attitude towards life, whatever it is.
All in. We're all in kind of people.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. We're all in. Either I'm in or I'm out.
Yeah.
And I decided, I made a commitment. No matter what happened, I would not leave that program. And I stayed for the 28 days. And I had another little epiphany. For the first time since I'm a kid, because I drank and drug for a couple of decades, I didn't drink and drug for 28 days. And I asked myself a better question. How did this happen? Why do I have such bad breaks? Why life stink? How come everybody's picking on me?
How'd I get so many days strung together?
Yeah, exactly. I asked a better question. And it was by listening to somebody who knew how to accomplish what I was trying to accomplish. That was my answer. And the people that taught me how to do that, but then I had to leave. That's where the rubber meets the road. So back then, this is 1990, there wasn't a lot of treatment facilities. I was lucky. I found the first one that opened in Jersey. And
wow.
And so they told me go to a 12-step meeting that day. I figured they haven't lied to me yet. So that's what I did. They told me go to aftercare, go to a 12-step meeting, go home and talk to your wife, see if you can save your marriage, things like this. So that's what I did. And I did the 90 meetings in 90 days thing. And it was good for me because let's face it, I'm sure you know that it takes as little as 28 days to break a habit when you want to do it, as little as 90 days to create a new habit. This has been studied every which way, no matter what the habit is. So I was trying to create some new habits. So that's what I did.
Healthy habits instead of unhealthy ones.
It's changed. I think you and I talked about this once, and you hear, don't go to meetings or don't drink and go to meetings or whatever the case.
Yeah. Don't drink and go to meetings.
The change part out. You've got to
absolutely.
Change. You know,
well, there's the sunlight of the spirit that needs to happen at some point.
Absolutely. And I still wasn't there yet. God and I still had a falling out from Catholic days.
I bet.
They told me turn the other cheek, and when you screw up, they throw you out. And all these conflicting ideas I had in my head had to be pursed and worked through. So that's what I did. But I went there and same thing. I realized I had to work. I had to get a job. So I wound up getting a little minimum wage job for a retailer that opened up in our town. And I'm working, and it was rotating shifts. So I'm working all types of hours. Then I realized I can't pay the bills making minimum wage. So now I'm working this crummy job. I'm unloading trucks, and now I'm working 2 full-time jobs, working 80 hours a week. I still manage to go to a meeting every day. Where there's a will, there's a way. Well, if I needed drugs or alcohol, I would have
gotten them.
Colds on my face to get what I needed. So
you crawled, you hopped along the way down the road to get your drink.
Absolutely. So that's what I did is I took a lot of the skill sets I had were transferable. I wasn't drinking and drugging one day at a time, but before that, I was existing one day at a time. I didn't think about anything in the future. I just thought about right now. So that was a transferable skill set. Same with my defiance. I made up my mind. I'm not going to do it. I used to sit in the meetings. I had no skill set. So I used to look around people I didn't like in the meeting. And I would say, if that jerk over there cannot drink today, I'll be damned if he's any better than me. So that's not really a good, sober way of thinking, but that's all I had at the time.
That's what you had at the time.
So I had to use it. So what happened was I did this for about 1.5 years. And during that time, I found a guy who was very successful in life. They told me, find somebody who has what you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I did that. And the guy was wearing a Rolex. I'm unloading trucks. He's got a new Lexus. We got a new 4-wheel drive. And he's talking about this God that I didn't understand one bit. And he's bouncing off the walls with it. So I'm saying, there's my guy. I don't even know. I was under the delusion that I could stand on my own and I was self-made and I didn't need anybody's help. And that whole, exactly, nonsense. When you think about it, what can I do on my own? I didn't make the computer we're talking on, the clothes I'm wearing, the gas in my car, the food that I'm eating.
Thank God that somebody 1,000 years ago sacrificed big time for us to be able to enjoy the comforts we live in today. We stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yes. And I thank God that people figured out how to not drink and drug one day at a time. And I could stand on their shoulders until I figure things out for which way my life should be. So I got this guy, and I'll tell you how sick I was. Like I said, I thought I was an atheist, but I was probably closer to an agnostic. And he told me, Brian, he goes, if you don't find a power greater than yourself, you couldn't stop drinking and drugging. So you were powerless. So he goes, I looked up the word power after that, and power means intelligently organized energy. And I was unintelligent, disorganized energy, creating chaos everywhere I went. So I'm thinking, okay, I can get with that. Somebody told me the good, orderly direction.
Absolutely. And we use that a lot. Yeah, I can get with that. Talking about, like I mentioned earlier, speaking of things in coincidence and then dragging them along from going, okay, can you see now that the coincidences are actually more blessings?
Yes.
Can we move to that little, and from that little jumping off point, we can move to the next level and then get you to believe, yes, there's value and merit in being self-made, but we all serve something.
Exactly. I'm not keeping my heart beating, my skin cells dividing, or my hair falling out. There's definitely a power in the universe that is beyond.
You don't wake yourself up in the morning.
Exactly. So these are very simple things to me now, but at the time they were huge hurdles for me to overcome. So I started listening to this guy, and I was so sick at the time that he told me, just try going home and getting on your knees and being humble and just say, God, I don't know what's going on. Please help me stay sober today. So I did that night. And my wife just happened to walk in the bedroom when I did that. And I was so sick at the time, I wanted to crawl into the bed. I was so embarrassed about looking weak. And that's how sick I was. And I didn't even realize it because all the horrible things I had done, and now I know some of them pretty horrible, that didn't embarrass me. Being on my knees and asking for help is what embarrassed me. So there was a lot of work to be done. If you're out there listening to this and you're thinking that you have a challenge with this, I definitely get it. I understand where you're at. So I found this God of my understanding, and I kept working and I kept just treading water. I was going to meetings, I was staying sober. And then I realized a lot of the people that were helping me stay sober, they really didn't have the life I wanted. They didn't have good careers. They were not great relationships with their spouses or their families.
They couldn't keep an apartment or house.
No, their financial scarcity never disappeared. And all these things.
I couldn't agree more.
And I'm watching people relapse. And these are the reasons that I'm lucky, because these things came to me that as I'm watching and observing, I don't want that. I want all the good things. I believe that now that I have this idea of God, that I'm a father, I wanted the best for my child.
Absolutely.
The creator of all things wants the best for me. So what's the best for me? What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? There's that question.
Yeah.
So I wound up talking to this guy who was a successful guy and had about 20 years sober. And he says, I've been waiting for you to start asking me some good questions. I said, I can't keep living like this. Waking up and doing a minimum wage job is not inspiring. It's depressing. I'm smarter than that. The guys I'm working for, I'm smarter than they are. I should have them in my back pocket. Yet they're telling me how my family's going to live, by how much I'm going to make and what I'm going to work. I said, well, I got to do something different. And this is what he told me. He said, Brian, what alcoholics and addicts have, what you have, they can't teach it in the Harvard Law School. They can't teach it at Harvard at all. He goes, you can walk in a room in about 5 seconds. You can spot the whole room. I can trust her. He looks a little shifty in the corner. I better keep my eye on this guy in the back. He goes, you have gifts and skills. These are part of your skill set. He goes, if you take those skill sets and combine them with the moral and ethical standards needed to stay sober, he goes, and put them towards your dreams and towards business. He goes, there's no stopping you. He never lied to me. So I said, okay, I'll try that. So I went home and I said, what do all successful people have in common? They make goals, some small, some large. So the building I was working in had almost 300 employees. I don't have a college degree. And I'm like, I'd never been in this business before. So the first goal I made was I knew who the store manager was in this place. I want his job. You know, that was first goal. And I gave myself a timeline when I was going to accomplish that task. So people say, well, didn't you worry about how you're going to do it? No, I made the why big enough. I gave myself reasons why. I made it so I can.
Okay. So repeat that point, because that's important.
When I got to the how with my goals, I made my goals big enough to be inspiring. And when I got to the how, I would get paranoid. Well, how am I going to do this? I have no experience. I started getting negative ideas. So I went and gave myself reasons why I had to accomplish these goals. And I used reasons like to make amends to my family, because I want to travel the world, because I'd like to own a new home, all these things that I want to do. And they were bigger than money and material things. But
I want to be told, well done, good and faithful servant at the end of the road.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I've been given gifts and abilities, just like they do with the Bible story of the 3 talents.
Absolutely.
Bury your talents in the yard. You've been a lazy and slothful servant, is what they told him.
Even the one that doubled it.
Yes.
It was only the one that made a return on investment that was praised.
Yes. And there's all kinds of investment. There's spiritual prosperity. There's materials prosperity, relationship. And these are all things I had to learn. But
how many times do we bury our talent and treasure for whatever reason?
Fear was the reason. Subconscious.
Play small. Playing small is fear.
Yep, exactly.
And fear is forget everything and run, or face everything and recover.
Absolutely. And that's a fact. And so what I did was I started making goals, and I started where I was. This is where I was. I was working there. This was what in front of me. Make a long story short, how committed? Few people, I'll give you this one. Few people are as committed as an alcoholic or an addict when they want what they want. Like I said, I would have crawled across hot coals in my face. I've had guns pulled on me. I've been in Harlem. I'm going to walk in that tenement and I'm going to get what I want. And I'm going to come back out. That's commitment. Most people cannot muster that type of commitment. We have that character trait. So I used that again. It was transferable. I used it to my advantage. Within 1.5 years, I was running that store. With 300 employees. Within 5 years, I was running the Mid-Atlantic division, thousands and thousands of people working for me for a Fortune 100 company. All of a sudden, I had never been successful like this, at this level. Now I have people heaping praise on me and stock options, and I'm building the house of my dreams and all the stuff that goes along. And I'm saying this for a reason, not to blow myself up, because this is what happened. Soon after things started hitting, I started forgetting what got me to the dance. I started forgetting to keep my recovery first. I started getting my egos. I started patting myself on the back. Aren't you doing well? Not realizing that there's gifts and I'm only doing what I'm supposed to be doing all along anyway. So things got really crazy and really good. And I stopped going to meetings. I was a 12-step guy. So I went from every day to 3 times a week, once a month, make a guest appearance kind of deal.
At anniversary nights, maybe.
Yes, exactly. And before you know it, I didn't realize it. I was the last to see it, that I was this close to picking up a drink and a drug.
Yeah. When you're Mr. Recovery and where the rubber meets the road is in the car, when it's only you and God.
Yep.
That'll know.
Yep.
And everybody will be like, oh no, Brian, you're doing so good.
Yeah.
And nobody would know, but that's the beginning of the end.
Yep. And I have to this day, I have to be very careful how I talk to myself.
Yes.
We talk to ourselves all day long, and my thoughts are either driving me up the mountain or into the gutter. And that's such an important thing I had to learn. Be careful how I talk to myself. This guy told me every time, all day long, every little thing, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Gratitude. Thank you, God. Because when I have gratitude, I'm at peace. I really possess and I'm enjoying what I already have. I'm not,
Yes.
I don't have to have anything else. It's
no,
right in the
I don't
moment.
have no regrets. That's how it's freeing. It's
Yes.
freedom from being locked in a chain gang of your own creation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's what I did. And I ran this business and things went well. And then life happens as it will. That back that I had broken, it went out again and I was paralyzed, totally paralyzed in my lower body. I couldn't get out of bed for over 6 months, wound up having neurosurgery and back surgery, and I had a 50% chance of coming back. Because of that, things happened with the job, where the job now, they didn't like that I was in there to perform as a top performer. So now we're at odds and things are going not well. And in that situation, my father-in-law is dying of Alzheimer's. All these things are happening. And right now, before this, I'm patting myself in the back and I have a lot of good things happening. I built the house of my dreams. I built an incredible place. I have horses and everything. I'm a guy who lived in a tent. You know what I mean? So
right.
You
have arrived. Right,
yeah,
Brian?
exactly.
You've arrived.
But now here it is. Life hit me with a bag of my own BS. And I'm there again. And am I going to drink? Am I going to run? What am I going to do? And that's
going to duck, hide.
Yep, exactly. Fear again. And I decided now's the time to double down on my recovery. And that's what I did. Then my sister passed away of a heroin overdose, which was almost the end. I was like,
tragic.
It's the icing on the cake to push me over. And I made decision. I will never put myself in a position where I am not putting my recovery first again. And that was a long time ago. So I wound up out of that. I wound up going back and I started meeting people and I started discovering the joy of working with newcomers. So I got on crutches again and giving it away. And it made me feel good to help somebody else out. Then all this money I had made, all this stuff, the stock market collapse and all that stuff, that all happens. So I'm like, damn, I told my wife, I didn't blow my money in alcohol and drugs. I didn't do this. And yet it's all gone anyway. What do I do? So I was like, okay, this must have happened for a reason. Back to those coincidences again. Mm-hmm. So I started laughing. I say, my sister just died. I'm like, what have I died? Asked a better question. What would I regret I didn't do?
Yeah.
And then I realized after working with other people, I regret not showing somebody else how I pulled it off, how all this experience was used. Then I asked myself another question. How would I do that? I said, well, you'd have to write a book. So like, I have no idea how to write a book. So I grabbed a pen and a paper and I wrote a line. I took action. That's what we have to do. We lack the action step. We talk ourselves out of the good ideas that are planted in our head. I take the action and then I see where it leads. And that's what happened. And the more people told me, you can't write a book. What do you know? I'm an alcoholic and addict. I hate to be told I can't do something.
Yeah. That's
really? You want
to watch me? Yeah. Well, and we talk about all the time in Recovery Comes Home and the Lodge at Delray Beach about the ABCs of recovery from anything. How you recover from anything is how you recover from everything.
Exactly.
Because you had your own physical recovery from your motorcycle accident that required that you do certain things. Now you had to customize your own plan to get your optimal results, but the basic structure is in place. Accept your situation and take action. Be brave enough to start over and over again until you get what you want. Absolutely. And create a stellar support system around yourself.
And what's funny, as an active alcoholic and addict, I did all that in reverse, but I did it. I had people that used like me. I knew I could cop from, knew how to take action. All the things that you talk about are, again, transferable into more positive, empowering behaviors that can get us what we really want.
And that's what we really try to drive home here on Recovery Comes Home Radio is, you know, I've talked to an overeater that her mother tried to murder her and she started overeating at age 12 to the point where it gets so bad. You just say, oh, it's just food. Well, there's a lot of people numbing themselves with food, number one.
Absolutely.
It's unhealthy for your body, number two. And it was getting so unhealthy because she was vomiting that it was causing her to vomit blood. So the people that think, again, it's just the wino in the street that is the problem, so it's not worth talking about, are missing the boat, because fentanyl is killing our children. It's coming over in Skittles packets, and it's killed more people than COVID, alcoholism, addiction, and suicide since 2019, but it's not a public health crisis.
No, and if people only knew, I mentioned to you some of the stats that I was talking about these insurance providers with. Last year, it cost our economy, $2 trillion.
Yeah.
That's as much as the entire deficit of the United States, $2 trillion. And that doesn't include all the heartache. And again, I've lost family members, and it's a family disease. My sister's son died of an overdose. Yeah. So it just continued. So the whole goal is break the chain. By me staying sober, I can break the chain and move forward. So I wrote that book, and I wrote a few others, and then one became #1 bestseller on Amazon for a hot second, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And a Hollywood producer called me up, and I can't break his anonymity.
Sure, of course.
He says, I read this book, and I really love this program you developed. And he goes, I'm just going to tell you, people look at me like I'm successful. He goes, I'm hanging here making a living off of Universal. I hate it. I want to do independent movies, but I'm afraid to move forward. And he goes, I only have 7 years clean, and I'm afraid to relapse. And we started talking, and he's got the same fears and concerns, and he's a highly successful guy. Anybody would look at him and think that. But he's got the same feelings as the rest of us.
That's the therapeutic value of one addict helping another.
Absolutely.
Is that you can come from a place of hopefully understanding and empathy, where too many times we're met with judgment and stigma.
Yes. And empathy, that's the word, empathy. Being able to put ourselves in.
Yeah, not sympathy. Don't feel sorry or pity.
No, empathy. Yep, without a doubt. And so I'm thinking, okay, I asked myself a better question. How can I work with this guy? I'm living in a place called Stillwater, New Jersey. I'm thinking, well, I can't put him up in the Newton Holiday Inn for a couple of months while we do this. Those guys are the real deal. So it was back at the financial collapse, and I just put it out to God. Hey, help me. And I get a call from a realtor that I had done business with. Says, I understand that you're thinking about doing some career changes and everything. I goes, I know this insurance executive who has an estate on 110 acres out in the woods up here, and he's willing to do a really good deal with his wife's like green acres. He said, move me back to Manhattan or I'm leaving you. So I made a deal, and he was my first client, and he came in, and from there we started taking people through our program, and that was like our halfway house. From there we became a licensed treatment facility. We went from there to another building, and we continued. We became CARF accredited, and from there we said, how are we going to keep reaching more people? That's the whole deal. How can we keep giving this away? And that's how we came up with our Freedom 365 app, which is really like having a complete recovery coach in your pocket 24/7. So the whole deal is just keep giving it away. Now, it's funny. Now I'm an old guy, and I'm out here in the Southwest, you know what I mean? And I have a life that I could have never envisioned, because the idea is alcoholics and addicts are smart people. We're clever. We're
exceptionally smart
what
people.
We put ourselves through would have killed a lesser person.
Absolutely.
And the whole deal is I had to realize that was a gift that was given me. What was I going to do with that gift? And I've chosen to keep pressing that gift forward. And even at this age, I'm lucky enough to be in a position where being sober 33 plus years, all the experiences, having to met all types of people, from the person at the Salvation Army. I've eaten in the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I know both sides of the street. This is definitely the easier, softer way. This is the life you want. But I can't sit on my.
It's a lot of work to keep up a facade of a life. And everybody knows that you're being a bad CEO of your own life, but you.
Yes, it's it. It's almost like that few addicts or alcoholics ever really think that people know that things are as bad as they really are.
As they really are. Yeah. So the denial is so huge. I wanted to highlight something that you said, because I think it's important. One of the tenets that we appreciate so much about AA versus the Oxford group that AA was kind of loosely based on is that in the Oxford group, you helped another alcoholic to keep them sober.
Yes.
In a 12-step group, you're helping another alcoholic or addict to keep you sober.
Absolutely. And it's the same with anything. If
It
I
is.
if I want to become wealthy, I've got to figure out how to help other people, provide them type of service that will help them improve their life. If I
If
want
I
a
want to
good
be
marriage,
connected
I
to
got to be
people,
a
I
good
got to be
husband.
connected.
Yes.
I got to be a connector to other people. I have to give what I have, because you can't hold like this onto everything that you have and have open hands to receive at the same time. It doesn't work.
No. And if you look at whatever type of prosperity or affluence you're looking for, whether it's spiritual or recovery or material, or I'll go with it. The word affluent actually means to flow. It comes off of the word affluer. So the idea
Wow.
is you've got to keep that river flowing. Giving and receiving are two sides of the same coin. It's just passing it right through. And we know what happens to a river if it gets jammed up, or a lake, and it becomes stagnant. And that's what happens with us. And instead of looking at it like I'm giving something away, I'm looking at it like I'm having the joy of watching somebody else have the lights go on. When you see the light go on in somebody's eye,
It's all
nothing
worth
juices
it.
you up like that. You know?
Nothing juices you up like that. And this is a hard business to be in. There's
Sure.
a lot of loss. There's a lot
Sure.
of heartbreak. But for that one light that goes on,
Yep.
it's everything.
And you don't know.
And you don't know what order you're going to be in the change in somebody's life. You could be number 1 or number 2 times to tell them, or it could take them 13 times. You don't know. And maybe you'll never know how you impacted people. But we're coming to our time to a close here. And I want to circle back to the question that you asked our audience to keep in mind in the beginning, which was,
what would you do if success was guaranteed? If you knew you couldn't fail, if you could do anything, if you had unlimited time, freedom, and money, that really tells you where your interests lie. What's in your heart? No fear, just what juices you up. What would you do? And that's a good place to start.
All right. So let me ask you this question then. I'm going to reflect it back onto you. If you were sitting across from you at 12 and you wanted to instill that in a 12-year-old, that the envisionment of the perfect future, or I don't want to say perfect future, but you know the gist that I'm getting at.
Yes, I do.
Their analysis paralysis because they don't know where to start. So what would you have told you to get that process of moving forward going?
I would say that the ability to take small actions on a daily basis over an extended period of time is what got me where I wanted to be. A question to ask yourself is, what do you enjoy doing? What would you do for free? We all have things that make us feel good about being ourselves. How can I work that into my lifestyle? How can I work that into a way even better, getting paid? How can I work that into improving somebody else's business? We all have gifts. I like talking with people. I like people.
And we're not unemployable.
No. And again, I mentioned it earlier, a career or a future working for low wages, or a Kentucky Fried Chicken, or settling for something that's below our potential is no way to live life.
No.
I believe we were all created for something better. I believe that our Creator gave us our talents, our gifts, our abilities to use. And the thing is, for me, when I'm using them, I feel good. There you go. When I'm fearful, when I'm stagnant, when I'm in doubt, I feel less than. And that makes me think about what? Escape.
Right. And instead of doing esteemable things to get self-esteem.
Yes, exactly. The guy told me that too. He said, Brian, you want better self-esteem? I said, yeah. He goes, do some esteemable acts. He goes, try doing something for somebody and asking for nothing back. And
no expectations, releasing the outcome.
Exactly. And he told me that, and I still remember it. It was many years ago.
Brian, well, I love this conversation, and we're going to have to connect you again to our audience. And I really want people to go and make sure and go to the show notes. I think on YouTube, it's going to be in the description. We'll have links. I really think what you're doing, it's in a similar vein to what we're doing. We need to raise awareness.
Absolutely.
The time for holding our tongue about addiction is over.
Agreed.
It's killing us from the inside out.
That's it. When I was drinking and drugging, I didn't care who knew. All said, now I'm sober. I'm supposed to hide under a rock. No.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to shine my light from that mountaintop. And that's exactly the city on the hill. And that's really the way I should be. And it's the way I am. And I highly recommend it. I used to look at things like, what if I fail? Which gave me negative connotations, made me feel bad about myself. Now I just look at them like a scientist does when he does an experiment. I get a result. Either I get one I liked or one I didn't like, but either way I learned something. So how can it be failure? So I just keep pressing forward. And that's how simply I look at life. And it's been a crazy adventure.
Yeah, it has. It's a crazy adventure. I'm glad that you opened up and shared some of your personal story. The next time we have you on, we'll have you in more of a professional capacity and maybe teaching our folks some stuff. But in the meantime, thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Comes Home. Make sure and visit Brian and his wonderful program on our show notes and the description for the YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Recovery Comes Home Radio. We hope that today's episode has provided you with valuable information and insights on the recovery process. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Keep seeking support, practicing self-care, and moving forward one step at a time. Until next time, stay strong, stay resilient, and stay humble. Hope lives here.